Welcome to the Strength for Life podcast, where smart strength training meets real life. We're Dr. Matt and Nicole Klingberg, founders of Village Fitness and Physical Therapy. Here you'll learn what really works in the gym, at home, and for life. All right, very exciting today on the Strength for Life podcast. Nicole and I have our favorite nutritionist in the whole world. We are biased, Casi Garcia. She is the nutritionist at Village. She works at both of our locations, working one-on-one with clients, and is a big part of what we do is helping people with their nutrition. And so we're super excited to have you on the pod today to talk about this new the new food guidelines that have just come out for Americans.
Yeah, super excited to talk about this. This is like my Super Bowl. So I know most Americans don't actually read this, but for me, this is like the epitome of excitement.
Yeah. So what are kind of like the main takeaways and things that you feel like people should know from the new guidelines?
Yeah, so I think overall, the new guidelines are much shorter and more succinct. So that's one really good thing because I don't actually know anyone who's read any of the prior guidelines.
Yeah.
And
The old
maybe,
guidelines were like 165 pages and the
yes,
new ones are 10,
yeah, yeah.
which is great.
So off the bat, I think there is power in being succinct, and maybe more people will read it and internalize those messages. So that's great. Other major takeaways, we have increased our protein recommendation by quite a bit. So that's fantastic. There's an emphasis on whole foods and removing ultra-processed foods in the diet, with specific call-outs of chemical artificial ingredients, non-nutritive sweeteners, which has never existed in our guidelines before. So that's fantastic. There is stricter wording and added sugars. So removing added sugars in the diet and caps on that. And then broader inclusion of saturated fat foods or whole foods that include saturated fats, such as red meat, butter, tallow. I think those are the main takeaways, at least that when I was reading through them. Are there any other things that you guys feel like were really pivotal or big in terms of changes to what we had been doing?
I mean, there was some mention of gut health and
Oh
like
yeah.
fermented and
Yeah.
probiotic rich foods. I think that's huge
Mhm.
and going to be really helpful for people. I mean, that's something that I have never heard any health person disagree with, that
Yeah.
fermented foods are good for us. And so I was really, really happy to see that in there.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a really, really good thing.
Yeah, I agree. Awesome. Well, let's talk first about the old pyramid. And I think a lot of people are kind of comparing the one that was released in 1992, mostly because it was the shape of a pyramid. And that's actually the one that we all grew up with and really shaped, I think, a lot of the food that we ate as kids. So I used to eat for breakfast most days some type of refined carbohydrate. I always had cereal, I had Eggos, Pop Tarts, like basically anything that was easy to grab and was, had added sugars and no nutritive value at all.
What did you eat for breakfast growing up, Casey?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, frosted cornflakes.
Nice.
We had a
Yeah.
sugar bowl on the table, so we'd like add more sugar on top of our breakfast
Dang.
cereal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Lots of cereals, lots of Pop-Tarts. We
Okay.
weren't rich enough to be a toaster strudel family, but
Are
we,
those more expensive than Pop Tarts?
yeah, we identified as a toaster strudel family, but we didn't
Okay.
actually buy them.
We got honey bunches of oats, but we were at the level of wealth where you could only have that on the top of the
Mm.
cereal. Like you had to have the cheap cereal on the bottom,
Oh my
and
God,
just a little bit of the honey bunches because those were more expensive on top. I remember that vividly. My mom was like, "You
that's
can
so
only have a little
funny.
bit. That has to last all week."
Oh my gosh. Apple Jacks, all the
We
all
didn't
the
have that at my house. No, we had like Raisin Bran or like bran cereal. That had to be the base of your cereal because that was healthier. And then the honey bunches of oats could go on top.
Yeah. But I mean, this is very much in line with what was recommended at that time. Like the base of the pyramid was bread,
Yum.
cereal, rice, and pasta. And they recommended 6 to 11 servings, which is significant, I would say. I mean, that means you
Yeah.
have to eat those at every meal. And I think the problem is that they didn't necessarily specify if it was supposed to be whole grains or like the sourcing. It was I think people took that very liberally and just were like, okay, well, that means I can just have these things at every meal. And I should, because that's kind of the staple and the main thing that should be the part of my diet. So, and then I would say I ate that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. For lunch, it was usually like Lunchables or, pizza from the cafeteria or different processed carbohydrates. And then for dinner, a lot of times, I mean, there would usually be some protein and dairy in there, but a lot of it was based around things like pastas or sandwiches and breads and things like that. And that was like the main staple of my diet growing up. So, what
And
about
here
you
you
guys?
are.
Here I am. What about you, Casey? What do you typically have for lunches and dinners growing up?
Yeah, very ultra processed. So Lunchables, microwave meals, frozen meals, lots of
Mm-hmm.
like steam in the bag, kind of stir fry veggies,
Mm-hmm.
white bread, miracle bread, potato rolls. I had a peanut butter and fluff sandwich on a potato roll like every day for lunch for at least 5 years.
Fluff is like the marshmallow thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the
Okay.
marshmallow fluff.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Dang. Dang. Your baby Teddy, he has not had marshmallow fluff yet, I'm assuming.
No, we're gonna wait till he's at least one until we introduce marshmallow fluff.
Uh,
Oh man.
that's good.
Well, some other notes I think on that food pyramid was that things that maybe weren't that different than what they are today is they still recommended that you get 3 to 5 servings of veggies. And, now it's recommended at least 3 servings. Fruit, it was 2 to 3 or 2 to 4 at the time. Now it's 2 servings of veggies. Meat was 2 to 3 servings, which isn't super specific. And I think now it's a lot more specific. It's based off of,
Grams of
kilograms,
protein.
yeah, for body weight. They recommended dairy 2 to 3 servings. Now they're recommending dairy 3 servings, but there's an emphasis also on full fat, which is great.
Yep.
And then part of the food pyramid, which I think was like the worst part, was that sugar was at the top. And
Right.
now they're recommending no added sugar. So I think
Yeah.
that is really important to highlight.
Huge.
So,
Yeah. I think it'd be great to look at the new graphic, right? So it's
yeah.
and very simple.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Sugar's nowhere to be seen. So that's a really good thing.
Yep.
And then at the top now, since we flipped it, we have meat at the same level of importance as veggies.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a really big thing to highlight for people. I've seen so much backlash about this,
Mm-hmm.
and that everyone's like, oh my gosh, red meat is at the top. And it is, but it's also in line with vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not necessarily pulling meat out as the primary driver of somebody's healthy diet. So I really like the new pyramid. I'm pretty pleased with the fact that we've gotten rid of sugar on there, that we have all those whole food options, uh, and that it cascades down into the grains.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think the reality is we've been coaching people to eat like this for since day one. Like we wrote Salubrious in 2018, and it was very, very much in line with this diet or this food pyramid, um, in terms of vegetables being really important, healthy fats being really important, well-sourced animal products being really important, and then um, grains being minimal and kind of limiting them to, like, I usually would tell people, like, keep your grains at dinner. Don't eat them during the morning or at lunch. That'd be my kind of general recommendation to folks. Um, and now it's like, oh, this is pretty similar to what we've been telling people to do. And then more recently, like, I think our stance on protein changed a couple years ago as we started to read, um, you know, research on how important protein was. I don't know, what was that, 2 to 3 years ago, where we kind of shifted and started talking more about protein?
Yep. Yeah, I would say like 3 years ago.
Okay. Um, I think we almost doubled our protein recommendation at that point.
Yeah, and now we say no less than 100 grams of protein per day for any adult, especially for our particular age group. So
Mhm.
adults over 40 who want to build muscle, 100
Or
grams or
keep their
more a day.
muscle.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
keep their muscle. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, why don't we talk about, yeah, how do you coach people and maybe some of the nuances of things that maybe are recommended or aren't recommended in the new food pyramid? And yeah, what you would recommend to somebody who, wants to get stronger, wants to maximize their health and longevity. And, obviously there's nuances based on, people's background, and you would go into that if you were with them one on one. And so you can't
Mhm.
make, you know, brushstroke things, but there are some general things. Like you said, 100 grams of protein is a really good starting point for a lot of people. What are some
Yeah.
of the other things that you recommend as a nutritionist?
Yeah. So as a nutritionist, especially working with our population, like you said, I work with people one-on-one with people that really want to change their diet. And that's different than people who might be reading these dietary guidelines because these guidelines are for everyone, for all economic groups, for all different cultural backgrounds, for adults, for kids. And so it's so much more broad, and you can't be as specific when you're making these large brushstroke recommendations. So if I were somebody who was actually reading this and using this new food pyramid to optimize health, I think there's a lot of good takeaways in here. And then there's some things that are kind of hard to understand or vague. So if we're looking through it, one thing that I think they do a really good job of is eating the right amount of food. So emphasizing portion control in this guide. Most people who think that they're eating healthy are still eating too much.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that chronic metabolic disease is a big problem in our country. We know that being overweight contributes to the metabolic diseases. And so most people are trying to lose body fat, and portion control is really going to help with that.
Totally.
Another really good thing about this is the focus on real food, the messaging, eat real food, and avoid ultra processed foods. However, it's not defined like what is an ultra processed food. So that's up to the individual to decide what an ultra processed food is. At Village, we look at the NOVA classification scale to help us understand what's an ultra processed food. And that's a scale that has 4 categories, with the fourth category being ultra processed. So if it's a food that has ingredients that are chemical, that are engineered in a lab, that you would never cook with at home, then it's an ultra processed food. So if I were using this guide and trying to avoid ultra processed foods, then I would say, oh, well, if I can transition from some ultra processed protein bars into eating minimally processed fermented beef stick, that would be a huge upgrade in terms of my gut health, my calorie control, my protein intake, etc.
Totally.
So trying
Will
to
you
get away from the
explain?
ultra processed food is going to be really helpful for most people.
Will you explain those for, you know, the NOVA categories and helping people understand like what kind of falls into each one of those four?
Yeah. So category one are whole foods on their own. So think of like an apple, a green bean, a steak. That's category one, whole food. Category two are ingredients you would never eat on their own, but are simple and can be added to whole foods. So that's like oil, salt, um, not too many things fall into that category. Spices, seasonings. It's like stuff that you would never put on a spoon and put into your mouth.
So those are more like culinary ingredients, things you would add while you're cooking.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Category three is a combination of category one and category two. So that could be things like cheese, right? It's like dairy plus salt. Could be fermented foods, cabbage plus salt equals sauerkraut. It could be really simple ingredient items like breads that are just flour, water, salt. So it's whole foods plus a culinary ingredient equals category three. And all three of those categories are healthy in our diet. We can eat category one, two, and three and do great. Category four is where you have like your frozen pizzas and your fast food and the sneaky things like sugar sweetened yogurts with artificial flavorings and natural flavorings, the protein concoctions, the newest craze on the market with all the fiber and the added proteins and the added artificial flavorings. That's when you run into trouble with those category four foods because they trick our hunger cues. They make you feel less full than you should. They make you feel hungrier sooner than you should after eating them. And they disrupt your gut microbiome, which raises inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to avoid those category four foods.
Which I love. They said that in the new guidelines. They talked about the gut microbiome and how like ultra processed foods do affect your gut. And they didn't get, you know, super detailed into it. But then adding in, staying away from ultra processed and then adding in fermented foods can be beneficial, which is
Yeah,
incredible. So, and we've been talking about that with clients for years, but
for
it's
years.
great that it's
Yeah,
more mainstream.
totally. Yeah, if you think about fermented foods in the context of, say, 200 years ago or before the dawn of refrigeration, if you cooked food and then you had leftovers the next day, it was fermented. It sat on the counter and it would grow beneficial bacteria. So there was a huge proportion of the foods that we ate that was living, that was giving our gut that population of healthy microbes. And now we have refrigeration, everything is sterile. You have to really try, you have to go out of your way to get that fermented food into your diet.
Mhm.
What are some examples of fermented foods?
Yeah, there's tons of fermented veggies. The most common ones that I see day to day are sauerkraut, kimchi, maybe like fermented carrots or beets or something to that effect. Then we have vinegars are fermented, so apple cider vinegar is a fermented food. Sourdough bread is made with a fermented starter. It's not a great source of fermented food, but it is fermented to some degree. Kombucha is fermented. Miso, lots of Asian style foods or culinary foods that are fermented. So, like uh, miso is fermented. Wasabi is traditionally fermented. Kimchi fermented. But mostly you're going to see traditionally fermented meats. So, like sausages used to be fermented, but they are no longer usually
Mhm.
fermented. Mostly it's going to be plants.
Okay. And kefir.
Yeah, kefir. That's another good
Kefir,
one.
that's a good one. Yeah, dairy, of
Mhm.
course. So,
Yeah,
cheese, dairy, kefir.
yeah, love it.
Yeah.
So what other things would you, yeah, say you would recommend to someone that's asking for,
It was kind of walking through the food
yeah,
pyramid.
the food pyramid? And then I
Yeah.
cut you off. Yeah, and after you
Yeah,
explain the four different classes of Nova.
totally. The protein. So I think if you're trying to get the amount of protein that's recommended, which is now
1.2 to
the
1.6 grams per kilogram, which is like 0.54 to zero point 0.7 something grams
grams
per
per
pound.
pound.
So
Yeah.
the when I give my strength training for seniors talk, I recommend zero point 0.7 grams per pound of body weight. So
Yeah,
kind of
that's
like
what I do.
the upper end of that. But I'm hopefully speaking to people that are strength training, that are active, that need a little bit more protein. They're older, which all those factors, in my opinion, put people on the higher end of protein recommendations. So, zero point 0.7 grams per pound. If you're 150 pounds, I think it's like 108 grams of protein per day. And I've just been telling people, and I think you would agree, like 100 grams is kind of a good minimum because it is a little bit complex to do math and figure out grams per kilogram or grams per pound. So 100 is just a good kind of like just eat 100. Um, yeah, and protein's kind of like our body soaks up protein like a sponge. It's like the more we put in, like it's not doesn't have the same impact as the first, like the from 0 to 20 grams, that's going to give you the most protein synthesis. Then 20 to 40 is going to give you more, but not quite as much as 0 to 20. So the more and more you add, the less and less effect it has. So, 100 grams will cover most of your bases for what you need protein wise.
Yes, definitely. And if someone's trying to get 100 grams of protein a day, which they might be based on these new guidelines, it's it's going to predispose them to making better choices at each meal because
For
you
sure.
can't get 100 grams of protein if you're eating cereal for breakfast.
It's tough.
It's tough. So I
Mhm.
think leading people towards those different choices naturally makes it more impactful than saying like, "Hey, don't eat sugar for breakfast." Instead, it's like, "How are you going to get your 100 grams of protein in?"
Right.
Oh, I guess you're going to have to displace those lower quality foods with better protein choices.
Totally. Well, so after protein, what else would you recommend?
Full fat dairy.
Love
Yeah,
it.
huge fan of full fat dairy. We talk to our clients about dairy in general is it's full of sugar, right? There's natural sugar in dairy. It's nutrient dense, there's high protein, there's so many good things about dairy. And by the way, grass-fed dairy specifically and raw dairy can have an even better health impact. Of course, at this point, we can't make those recommendations on a national level. But we know if you're optimizing your nutrition, that grass-fed raw dairy is super, super helpful to your body. But full fat dairy is more blood sugar stable. When you eat skim milk or drink skim milk or eat low fat dairy, you're spiking your blood sugar. Like I know type 2 diabetics who drink milk when they're having a sugar crash. They drink skim milk because it will bring your blood sugar back up. When you have
Interesting.
full fat dairy, the fat in the dairy buffers the blood sugar effect. So it
Mm.
keeps you more stable, it keeps you more full, it helps you make better food choices later in the day.
Totally. Do you want to talk about the differences between just like naturally added sugars that, occur in food versus like when they add sugars to things like a lot of, yogurt, for example, does have, flavored yogurts have added sugars. And what does that look like? And why is that different than just the sugar that's in the dairy itself naturally occurring?
Yeah. So, like you said, there's naturally occurring sugars. They're found in dairy, they're found in fruit. There's naturally occurring sugar in nuts, in vegetables. But then there's added sugar, and that's any kind of external source of sugar that's added to a food. So that could be cane sugar, it could be corn syrup, it could be rice syrup, it could be honey, maple syrup, agave, anything that is sweet and caloric that's added to food is added sugar. And particularly, what's dangerous about added sugar is when it's in beverages. So, sugar sweetened beverages, we know, have the most negative health outcomes. uh, Soda, for instance, fruit
Mm-hmm.
juice. And
Mm-hmm.
this guide actually does a really good job of discouraging sugar sweetened beverages in general and discouraging sugar sweetened dairy products. So, like flavored milks, flavored yogurts, for instance.
And do you think that's because those are easy to consume a lot of, or it's because they don't have what's necessary to like blunt the blood sugar response, or maybe a combination of both, or
It's
something else?
it's yeah, I don't think it's about quantity, it's about how much they affect your body, even
Mm.
in a normal serving size.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
like in our school food system, we serve flavored milks, sugar sweetened yogurts, and we serve them in really small amounts. And they're still, like, for instance, a child-sized serving of a strawberry yogurt can have as much as 12 grams of sugar in it, added sugar. There's 4 grams per teaspoon. So that's a lot of sugar coming into a really small package.
Yeah, that is. That's crazy. Okay, so we talked about that. Something else popped in my head. It's now completely gone from my head. Oh, are you good on sugar? More sugar questions?
I think one
Okay.
of the things that I would love to dive into a little bit more is like you've done a really good job of explaining this, to clients before of like why, I think there's been more awareness of like blood sugar and insulin and diabetes because the prevalence of type 2 diabetes has grown significantly. There's lots of kids now that have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. And it used to be called when we were growing up adult onset diabetes. And now that's no longer the case, unfortunately, like probably because kids are consuming so much sugar, that's leading to and contributing to at least plays a part in maybe not the whole picture but a lot of issues that people are having like chronic diseases. So maybe explain how that affects people's blood sugar and like their insulin response and then why that how that ties to like their metabolic and just overall health. I know that's a lot, but
I know, like,
yeah.
where do I start? So,
Yeah.
the main thing about a high glycemic diet, so that's foods that have a really big load on your system in terms of how much is it going to spike your blood sugar after you eat it. The problem with a really high glycemic diet is that it leads to the need for high insulin in your body. So when you eat, say, a cupcake, you chew it up, it goes down your esophagus, goes into your stomach, and then in your small intestine, the sugar starts to absorb out into your bloodstream. Your bloodstream has to be a tightly controlled, about 1 teaspoon in your entire circulatory system. You can have 1 teaspoon of sugar, and you need 1 teaspoon of sugar circulating, glucose. If it goes too high when you eat the cupcake, your body has to find ways to bring that back down into balance. And so the major way that we do that is the pancreas secretes insulin, and insulin knocks on the doors of the cells, of the muscle cells, of the liver, the small intestines, and it says, "Hey, do you have some room for sugar?" And they open up and they say, "Yes, of course." And they absorb some sugar from the blood, and then you come back into homeostasis. And that's how it should work. We need that system. We eat, blood sugar rises, we secrete insulin or move, by the way. Exercise is another way to get that stable blood sugar. And then it comes back into balance. However, when you have amounts of sugar in your diet that are so outside of physiological norms, your body goes into this fight or flight response. It's like when you drink a Coca-Cola, and you would never find that much sugar in nature, your insulin, your pancreas has to secrete so much insulin to bring everything back into balance, that if it does that over and over and over again, then you have dysregulation of that system, and that's insulin resistance. It's like the boy who cried wolf, insulin over and over and over, multiple times a day, every single day, the cells stop responding, which causes obviously type 2 diabetes, which we know is a really huge prevalent concern in our society.
Totally. And then how does that tie into a lot of things that people are seeing? Like, yeah, having, obviously you talked about diabetes, but like, how does that contribute to heart disease or metabolic disease or people gaining weight, and contribute to obesity?
A couple of different ways. So when you have chronically elevated blood sugar, you have more oxidation going on in your body. So we have things called AGEs, advanced glycation end products, and that's, you can sort of think of it as like your blood gets sticky. So the sugar in your blood starts to attach to different things, to oxidize and break down. That can cause plaques in your arteries. That can contribute to high blood pressure, um, mostly high blood pressure in that context. Uh, Also, your microbiome, when you have chronically high elevated blood sugar, it starts to change the amount of microbes, the diversity of microbes, and how well they can behave in your gut to secrete um, all of the molecules that we need for low inflammation. So we have short chain fatty acids that are secreted by our healthy gut microbes. And if your gut's not healthy, you're not secreting the right balance or amount of short chain fatty acids. And so then inflammation can go up. The junctions between your cells and your gut can get leaky. You have chemicals coming out of your gut into your bloodstream that shouldn't be there. That's another avenue where we can see really seemingly unrelated chronic disease, but because there is foreign substances into your blood going throughout your circulation that shouldn't be there, it is related to that inflammation that could really start with just too high of sugar intake.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for explaining all that. I think that's super helpful. So what would you recommend to like somebody who is maybe they do drink a lot of soda or they do have a lot of added sugars in their diets? Like what are some of the actionable things that you recommend? Because I think it's really hard and sometimes the gap for people feels so wide. Like, well, I could never just, cut all of that out.
Yeah.
Especially because it's often ingrained in, people's like cultural rhythms and who they spend time with and access to different things. And so, like, what are some easy swaps that you have for people who are trying to minimize added sugars?
Yeah. I think of nutrition as a giant ladder. So it's like at the bottom of the ladder are either people that can't eat food, that are in food deserts, or the only food available to them are convenience store foods or primarily fast foods. And the top of the ladder is like, I have my own cow and my own chicken and my own goat and my own farm, and I make all my food and that's all I eat. And very few people are at the bottom, very few people are at the top. But in between, there are unlimited rungs to this ladder.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone is in the middle of the ladder and they're really battling an addiction to soda, say Mountain Dew, because I see that one quite a bit, the next best thing would be to reduce that in their diet. Even if it means using diet soda for a while, that would be an improvement.
Sure.
And that brings me to one of my biggest gripes with the recommendations here is that without a lot of context, there is a recommendation to remove non-nutritive sweeteners from the diet, meaning diet soda or, added sucralose or, Splenda, people will call it. And I think that can be really harmful to a lot of people because I would sure as heck take someone drinking diet soda over regular soda. Do I think it's great? No, definitely not. And diet soda will affect your microbiome as well. But if the
Yeah.
next best choice for you is to switch from regular soda to diet, that's great. That's your next best thing. From there, then we can pull back, maybe sparkling water, maybe herbal teas, maybe unsweetened black tea. Other beverages can take the place of that. But as long as you're moving up one rung at a time towards a better diet, that's all we can really ask.
Totally.
That's very well said. I like that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I love that.
I haven't heard the rung thing before. I've heard a lot of this. I've heard a lot of you talk, but
Mhm.
I haven't heard you talk about the rungs. I think that's really helpful for people to understand. And I agree. I think that nuances is really helpful and totally aligned with. I would so much rather have somebody going from soda to diet soda than just continuing to drink soda.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think another question I've heard, just in general from clients, is like their issue around with animal protein is the issue of saturated fat, and just like the sourcing, the quality, and everything that goes into that. And so maybe you can speak to if someone's concerned, like, okay, animal products are at the top, but I've been told to minimize saturated fat, and there even is a recommendation in there to keep your calories at 10% or less of saturated fat. And so, how does someone fit within their recommendations, or do they maybe not need to based on the sourcing of the animal protein?
Yeah, the saturated fat thing. So the 10% of total calories from saturated fat is not new. That's been the recommendation for many years. What's different in this is that there's a recommendation to eat more meat, more red meat than ever before. And I would say one of my biggest gripes with that as well, with the infographic at least, is that I think that fish and seafood should be above the red meat on this. That would be my uh, preference there. But saturated fat in general, what we know from our research is the most dangerous combination with saturated fat in terms of risk of cardiovascular disease is when it's paired with high added sugar foods.
Yeah.
And when we look at people's diet, they're getting the most of their saturated fat from things like sandwiches and baked goods.
Hmm.
So if you take this recommendation, 2025 recommendation, and you say eat real food and saturated whole fat uh, and sources of saturated fat that are whole foods are okay, then you'll have lower risk because you're not eating ultra processed, fried, breaded, sandwichy, muffiny foods. So, in that context, I think the emphasis on protein and animal foods and whole fat dairy is probably fine. In the context of someone eating like hamburgers from fast food restaurants
Hmm.
and fried chalupas and taquitos and like the combination of ultra processed refined carbohydrates and saturated fat, that's really bad. And we know that.
Yeah.
So say, for example, I work with somebody who's 65 years old that has elevated cholesterol, they're taking a statin drug, and their LDL is high, maybe even their oxidized LDL is high. The first thing that I look at is not their whole food forms of saturated fat. I don't really care if they're eating steak every once in a while. I don't care if they're eating full fat dairy. I really care about ultra processed fast foods. I really care about added sugar. And those things are going to make such a bigger impact if you change compared to taking red meat out of somebody's diet.
Totally.
And then I think you also had a question about quality. We know that quality matters. Grass-fed meats are different than conventional meats. Pasture-raised chickens are a whole different food than a conventionally raised chicken. They have a different proportion of fatty acids. They have all the extra stuff that might be in the meat, so pesticides, herbicides, um, steroids, growth hormone, antibiotics. Uh, and so real pasture raised, wild caught, um, you know, well managed animals are super healthy. They're anti-inflammatory, they're high in protein, and they're part of a complete diet. And conventionally sourced animal foods are inflammatory and really bad for our health.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of nuance there.
Hmm.
You can't put that into a dietary guideline for Americans because we don't have enough access to high quality animal foods.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think if everybody had access to those really good quality animal foods, this conversation would be so much easier. If we had research about the health outcomes of good quality animal foods, it would really support the knowledge that whole foods are good and we don't really have to worry about red meat. We really do have to worry about all the ultra processed stuff.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, because a lot of the research on things like red meat comes from what are those studies called? Self-report studies.
Yeah, like a food frequency questionnaire where
Yeah.
they send out a survey and they say like, how many times a week do you eat
Hmm.
blank?
Red
You
meat.
know,
And often, I think most of Americans' red meat consumption are what you said. They're burgers and hot dogs and, you know, maybe some lunch meat thrown into a sandwich. It's like,
yeah.
that's not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about ideally grass-fed beef or free-range chicken, um, wild caught fish as kind of the basis of one's protein. So I think that's just very different, um, just like you said. So totally agree with that.
I think another gap, they didn't talk a lot. They talked about here's the ideal olive oil, which is great. It's a step up from, just a lot of other processed fats. But at Village, we tell our clients like you should eat healthy fat. But then there's also, it's a very nuanced, topic because the healthy fat can actually become unhealthy when it becomes oxidized, even in things like olive oil. Like if it's really highly processed, it sits in a plastic bottle and it's has exposure to the sun, it can become oxidized, and also at high heat cooking. And so maybe talk about like what do you recommend generally for people? Like what are the healthy sources of fat that you recommend adding into their diet? What do you recommend that they cook with or maybe not cook with? High heat versus like adding, to a salad dressing, because I do think that that's really important and it matters. And they didn't, the only three they mentioned was olive oil, butter, and tallow,
Hmm.
but they didn't give that any context.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, and I do see some political leanings with the tallow call out. I feel like that's
Mm-hmm.
just a random thing to put in there.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, like what about coconut oil,
there's like
avocado
so,
oil? There's
yeah.
so many other like fats other than tallow.
Yeah.
And
And
so
just a side note, like every recommendation for Americans that's ever come out since 1980 when this started has been biased in some way and
Hmm.
colored by the associations of the people, the authors writing the recommendations.
Mhm,
So I have seen a lot of backlash like, oh, they're paid by the Cattle Association or the dairy lobbyists or whatever. Like, yes, that's how it's always been.
mhm,
That's how grains became so prevalent in the old food pyramid.
mhm,
So I see that come through in the like specific tallow recommendation. But anyway, so healthy fats. We want to eat fats that are as minimally processed as possible. So if you're eating olive oil, that should be extra virgin olive oil, and it has a smoke point. It has a maximum heat that it can tolerate before it starts to break down and oxidize. So like 375-ish, which means extra virgin olive oil is great, but you can't use it for roasting or grilling or anything above that temperature. Avocado oil is a good high heat cooking oil. Coconut oil is good high heat. Any kind of animal fat, so the tallow could come into play with the high heat cooking, duck fat, schmaltz. Any of those traditional animal fats are really good for that.
What's schmaltz?
Chicken fat,
Mm,
I don't think we've
yeah,
ever cooked with that.
never heard
yeah,
of it.
yeah, schmaltz.
Schmaltz. I think you're making it up.
And then the seed oils that are healthy are really delicate. So that's like flaxseed oil. We want to avoid the sunflower, safflower seed oils because they're just so delicate that they're broken down and oxidized during processing. Uh, but like extra virgin olive oil, sesame seed oil, flaxseed oil, they're just more delicate because they have more of those polyunsaturated fatty acids and double bonds that can break down during processing. So they need to be really, really light heat cooking or salad dressings.
Well, it's the same thing with butter too. Like that's not a great high heat option, and you should
Yeah.
use probably ghee instead or
Yeah.
coconut oil or avocado oil, like you said,
Yeah.
for
Ghee is
higher
a good
heat.
one too.
Hmm. Yeah, great. What other questions have you gotten and things that you feel like you want to tell people about the pyramid or people that like, yeah, have just said, I don't understand this. Can you explain it? In regards to the new guidelines.
Yeah. I think that alcohol is another big area where things have changed dramatically, the recommendations. So there used to be a recommendation, so men shouldn't have more than two alcoholic beverages per night, per day, and women shouldn't have more than one per day. And we know research is coming out more and more that there is no amount of alcohol that contributes to health.
Mm-hmm.
It only detracts. And in our new guidelines, it just says minimize alcohol. If there's no like specific recommendation in there, let me find it. So it says consume less alcohol for better overall health.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Not super helpful.
Not super helpful. And I don't know why there wasn't a number put in there. It should say like no more than two a week. Like let's
Hmm.
assign a number to it that people can shoot for.
Hmm.
So I have had people say or speculate around like, well, is it they just want people to kind of work on reducing alcohol? They don't want to put a number on it. They like to drink alcohol, so they're hesitant to recommend a certain amount of alcohol. So that is something that I've had a couple of people bring up. And I agree. I think a number would have been way more helpful. I mean, there's a number on protein, there's a number on servings of fruits and vegetables, servings of dairy, etc. So why is there no specific guideline on that?
Hmm. Oh, that's great. What would you recommend
Yeah, I
to
was
somebody
gonna
who
ask.
wants to lose weight, improve their health and longevity?
What I have seen in the research is that two drinks a week or fewer is the best place to be. Ideally, zero. But
Hmm.
it seems like having two drinks a week, really specific, right? So like 4 ounces of wine, 12 ounces of beer, 1 ounce of liquor, not two like heavy pour drinks, um, probably has a minimal impact on your increase in health risk. So I would choose two.
That's great for men and women.
Yeah.
Right. I love it. Why don't we talk about a little bit about how this you think this is going to impact kind of the next generation? So our kids and yeah, how is this going to shape, what goes into school lunches, like what's served at hospitals and just, kids in general? Because I think what we're seeing now is really a trickle down effect of what we ate as kids. And
Hmm.
I mean, we've seen that like your kids will model and they have access to what they're given access to, like what they're given at school by parents, sports, activities, things like that. And unfortunately, a lot of those areas are just really just focused on heavily processed foods and a lot of added sugars. And so, how do you think this is going to impact that? And what are some of the changes you see happening because of these guidelines?
Well, I definitely see a lot of products coming on the market. I foresee many more high protein foods, added protein foods,
Hmm.
fermented foods, added probiotics in different products, probably high fiber foods because there is an emphasis on fiber in the new recommendations. So we're going to see lots of different extracted, purified fibers added into food products. Funnily enough, even though the recommendations say eat real food, I'm sure
Yeah.
we'll see even more ultra processed foods pop up to fill in uh, because of those recommendations.
Yeah.
But in terms of school lunches, I really hope that the emphasis on reduced added sugar translates into better school lunch choices.
Hmm.
Because, like you said, kids learn how to eat when they're kids and they take that with them. Of course, you can always change your habits. Like,
Hmm.
sounds like all of us have changed our habits based on how we used to eat as kids and how we eat now. But the best bet for our next generation is to provide them those healthy options when they're young so they know how to choose portion sizes, how to balance their plate, how to choose foods that are going to make them feel really good in terms of energy and brain function, and
Hmm.
avoid the foods that make them feel sluggish and slow.
Yeah. I love
Yeah.
how they got really specific in some of the guidelines on like the different ages.
Yes.
And so it's like no added sugars before age 4. And
Yeah.
then the emphasis in the like 5 to 10 years was like making sure that they're getting enough vitamin D and calcium for like bone health. And as they become adolescents, like more focused on like hormone health and things that can like different vitamin deficiencies and starting to talk about like if there are deficiencies in their diet, potentially supplementing. And so I think that's really important because a lot of, our like skeletal muscle and our bone health is really determined, in our first like 20 years of life. And it's not that it's like you can't do anything about it, but we really can, I think, change the trajectory of our kids' health by making dietary changes.
So funny story. We were supposed to bring snack for the basketball game, Cooper's basketball game this last Saturday. I'll tell you what, Casey, his game was at 9 a.m.
9 a.m.
So it
And
ends
I
at
was at the
10.
farmer's market.
So who needs a snack at 10 a.m.? I don't know. Apparently these, 9 and 10-year-old boys do. We forgot to
I for
bring
I
snack.
forgot.
Just
Oh
completely
no.
forgot. Team mom was not happy. because boys need snack. And I tell you what, these snacks are so, so bad. It's all ultra processed food, usually to the tune of like 600 calories of
Oof.
mostly carbohydrates and sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Um, so I mean, if you have 600 calories of sugar, that's like over 100 grams, right? If I'm doing my math right, because it's 4 calories per gram.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
nuts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling how much sugar. And then what I've started to see with our kids' friends, it's like every season we go back to baseball, there's like a couple more kids that are overweight, and it
Mm.
just looks so unnatural. And I know there's genetics at play, and whatnot, but I mean, these kids they play a ton of video games, they sit a lot, and they just have open access to very calorically dense, high sugar foods that are ultra processed, and it's like that's the recipe, and the end product is overweight obese kids that wind up with type 2 diabetes. um yeah,
And
it's
I
crazy.
would say, I mean, it's not like we're not sitting here like we've never fed our kids. Like we've let them have these snacks. And I think it's one of those things where it's like it's really hard when it's all around you. Like
And we're
it's
trying to tread the line of like we're not, you know, full-blown homeschool, we're like homeschool hybrid family. We're trying.
we're not fully
What's
School
the
light.
what
homesteading
homesteading, we're not
crunchy.
homesteading.
We're not
um
homesteading.
just kind of doing it. And so we let our I what my rule with our kids is like you can pick one thing from the snack bag and have it. I'm like, pick whatever you want. You have the thing. And I just hope and I pray that it's not a full sleeve of Oreos is one of
Which
the
Mm.
has
things in
happened.
there.
A
Wow.
legitimate entire sleeve of what, like 24 Oreos
Wow.
For every kid.
for every single child.
Mm.
So I just like I'm not gonna argue with you, dude. That's the thing you pick, whatever. I just we joke around that our kid like they got diabetes that day.
Oh my gosh.
You got diabetes today, dude. Um,
From how much sugar you
yeah.
consume.
Thankfully, our kids move a
Yeah.
lot. We exercise as a family. They play a lot of sports, and we eat, you know, a very real food diet. I'm not gonna say a healthy diet. I think we do, but what I can say definitively is our kids mainly eat real foods,
Hmm.
and I think that combats a lot of this other like stuff that's in their environment. I heard this study one time that if you eat like a handful of pistachios and then eat sugar, like the effect of the sugar is so much less than if you just had it by itself. Like there is no negative health consequence to adding pistachios. And I don't remember
Yeah.
if it was kids or adults in this study, but
There's another one that was done with
yogurt, full fat
with
yogurt.
full fat Greek yogurt. And like if you were gonna go to something like even just having like 3/4 of a cup of full fat Greek yogurt can really help blunt the blood sugar response if you were gonna
Yeah.
go to a party or something.
Mm-hmm.
So
Fiber.
yeah.
The main thing is if you can eat fiber before your high glycemic, high sugar foods, it
Mhm.
really helps slow things down. And it's because fiber creates sort of like a matrix around the sugar. So
Mm,
it slows down how quickly the sugar is uncovered and able to cross that barrier into your bloodstream.
yeah. And that's why I think berries are such a great source of carbohydrates because they have so stinking much fiber along
Yes.
with them. And anybody that says a carb is a carb or sugar is sugar, it's like you don't understand fiber and the impact that it has. And when you eat a blueberry, a raspberry, or a blackberry, it's like it comes with everything your body needs to actually slowly digest the carbohydrates and the sugar. And when you just have blueberry juice that is devoid of fiber, that's where it's like, oh, you're going to see a huge spike in your blood sugar.
Definitely. Yeah. And these guidelines also call out juices specifically,
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
which I love.
I think they say to minimize or try to avoid or just even dilute with water is what they
Yeah.
recommended.
Yeah.
So
To dilute
that's
with
great.
water.
Here's
And
what I would encourage people to do, and I think you would agree with this, Casey. Um, and this is probably coming from a place of like this is for people higher up the ladder, which is honestly most people listening to this podcast can probably do this. Um, I would get a continuous glucose monitor, and it's a little device that has like a sticky patch with a tiny needle in it, and it just goes, and suctions onto your
And
arm.
the scariest part is the sound that it makes. It doesn't actually hurt when
It
you
goes,
put
Does not hurt,
but it's
but it's
the like
terrifying.
yeah,
forcefulness of it. You're like wincing as you put it in. And then you put it in, you're like, oh, this isn't bad at all.
It's
yeah.
fine.
Here we were thinking Casey was crazy with her continuous glucose monitor.
Yeah.
And then we wore one for like 6 months last year.
Yeah.
And what I think that is so powerful about that is that I learned which foods impacted my blood sugar, and it was very like visceral, the learning, because I could see on an app how things impacted my blood sugar. And the two things that spiked my blood sugar the highest were Little League baseball coaching,
Stress.
stress.
Yeah.
Turns out I care too much. Who would have known? Who would have thought? Who would have thought? And the other thing was anytime I had sugar, even very, very small amounts of sugar in the absence of other macronutrients, like if I had a piece of bubble gum, like I had a piece of Bubblicious bubble gum while coaching baseball, my blood sugar was like up to
Wow.
200.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. And then it came like right back down. But
I
it
said that was a mistake. You should not have bought the gum for the
I can do it
children.
again. This year I'm not doing bubble gum for the kids. I am doing baseball cards. Baseball cards have no
Nice.
calories, no sugar. They're not even on the food pyramid. Um,
Oh man.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the
That,
continuous glucose monitor is such an excellent tool. It is,
Absolutely.
it's one of my favorite tools that I use with clients.
Hmm.
Even people that don't have defined prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, like you said, it's like everyone responds differently to different foods because you have a different microbiome and you have a different sleep pattern, you have different stress, and you have different metabolism. So using one of those, even for 2 weeks, like a
Yep.
single monitor, can help you identify what foods are spiking you. And that's the name of the game. That's longevity, right? It's like, let's keep our blood sugar as stable as possible over decades to help with longevity and health.
Yep.
I had a client just the other day who was using the Lingo glucose monitor that we
Yeah.
started selling, and she was like, sweet potatoes. I can't eat any amount of sweet potato in any context, or it's spiking me over 200. And I'm like, that's great to know because sweet potatoes are a classic health food, right? It's
Yep.
like that's one of the healthy carbs that we tell people to eat. But if your body doesn't handle it well, that's critical to know because then we can pull it out even when you're not using a glucose monitor, now you know sweet potatoes don't work for me.
Yeah.
yeah.
The second thing I think people should do is get blood work done. And that could be through your primary care physician. I think Function Health also does a great job of putting together a really comprehensive blood panel. It's like $500 a year, and you get two comprehensive blood panels. We have no affiliation with them, but I think that's like the easy button for blood work. And then you could do the first one, try some of these changes, and then 9, 12 months later, you get your blood work again and see if it improves. And I encourage people like take your health into your own hands. And that doesn't mean you don't have a physician. I think that people should have a personal physician, a family physician that they work alongside. But I also think that people need to have some agency and own it themselves. And I think a continuous glucose monitor and getting blood work done and really understanding like, well, how does this food impact me and my health, and going on a learning journey can be a really powerful thing for someone.
And I think that's why they use the word guidelines because again, they're guidelines, but they're not going to be nuanced and specific to each person in their life stage and where they're at. And I think it's like the more you learn about yourself, the more you can make decisions on your health and things that will impact it. And if you're, maybe you are following all the guidelines and you still have there's still some health conditions that you're struggling with. And we've heard of people that have like eczema issues or different things like that it's like I can't figure it out, and they go down the path of having to figure it out on their own. And in the process, they usually learn a lot about their bodies through blood work, glucose monitor, things like stool test, hair test. There's all sorts of resources now. And I love that it's direct to consumer for a lot of these things now. Like you can just go online and pay for the thing and, and take control of your health, which I think is great. And I think that will continue to grow over time. And I hope it does because I think that just gives more people access. It brings the price down. So it's not so out of people's price range. And I think that these guidelines are going to hopefully help, more of the mainstream and what doctors are recommending to eat real foods and not have such an emphasis on processed foods. So I'm super excited about them.
Me too. Casey, I know you need to get going here in a few minutes. Do you have any parting thoughts or anything else you want to add that we didn't cover?
I think overall, I'm really happy with these new guidelines.
Hmm.
I like the infographic, even though I don't think it's as helpful as the My Plate with an actual plate representation that we had before.
Mm-hmm.
I like how the foods are laid out. I like that there's some frozen foods on there, some canned foods.
Yeah.
There's whole foods which are affordable, right? Like people say it's expensive to eat healthy, but if you're eating whole foods and you're cooking dried beans and you're eating whole cuts of meat, like a whole chicken, it's actually way more affordable to eat healthy than it is to eat ultra processed.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really happy with the Eat Real food messaging. I'm really happy with the infographic. I think there's some, like we talked about, there's some areas where clarification is needed or it's vague on purpose, which is frustrating, but we're moving in the right direction as a nation. And for the people that are naysayers that are like, well, there's no research to support this or that, what we've been doing isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
So like, let's try something new. If research can't inform our decisions on this, that's fine. Like it'll catch up with us, but let's try something new. I say that on an individual level. If what you've been doing isn't working, do something different. And
Yeah.
that's hopefully what we're going to do with these guidelines.
And I mean, this approach has worked very, very well for hundreds of clients of ours that have gone through our nutrition
Thousands.
program. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
their blood work
Yeah,
changes, they lose weight, they feel better. Um, so this is how we. I mean, this is very similar to how we've been coaching people since 2018 when we started talking about nutrition, um, and it works. So I think that the take home is definitely a good one. It's like if you eat real food, you're going to be a lot healthier than those that don't.
Mm-hmm.
definitely.
Yep.
So thank you so much for doing
You're
this. We got
welcome.
to have you back on and talk about GLP-1s and other
Oh, yeah.
controversial topics. Um,
I love it.
yeah, I've been hearing a lot
Anytime.
about those lately. So yeah. But anyways, thanks, Casey. Appreciate
Happy to
you.
help, Casey.
Thanks, guys. Nice talking to you.